Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dismantling Injustice, the podcast of Brooklyn Community Bail Fund. At BCBF, we work with partners to free people from incarceration, whether that's prison, jail, detention, or surveillance. On this podcast, we offer analysis on issues affecting folks who encounter the criminal, legal, and immigration systems. As always, you can learn more about our work by visiting us at brooklynbailfund.org. I'm Carl, BCBF's Director of Advocacy and Policy, and I'm here with Sally Israel, the producer and creator of this podcast. Today we have a really special guest with us, my friend, colleague, and sister, Nana Gyamfi, the Director of Black Alliance for Just Immigration, or BAJI for short. And over the last few episodes, for folks that have been listening, we've been talking about some of the consequences, I almost said unintended, but some of them are very intentional, of the immigration bill that's been introduced in the Senate and championed by the Biden administration, and also Biden's immigration enforcement priorities. As a refresher, the White House has proposed legislation that outlines a plan to provide relief for certain immigrants, including deferred action for childhood arrival or DACA holders, temporary protected status holders, and other immigrants who've resided in the U.S. for a number of years. They've also sent a memo to ICE instructing them whom to prioritize for arrest and deportation and the criteria they should use for identifying those folks. That includes folks that have recently arrived in the U.S., as well as people who have been targeted by the criminal legal system. So basically our folks. And these are the people that Nana works with every day. Black communities, folks at the border, criminalized communities. And this is why we're so happy to have her on Dismantling Injustice. Now, outside of BAJI, Nana is a legend in California movement circles and a civil rights and criminal defense attorney who's fought for Black communities for decades. So, Nana, we're so happy to have you with us today.
So pleased to be with you today. Glad to be speaking with you every time, Carl.
Thanks. So I wanted to start by asking, I know that you have done a lot of work. I've heard you talk about it. I've heard you in meetings, rail about Biden's immigration plan. So I wanted to get your take on Biden's immigration agenda, his enforcement priorities, and overall what he's done so far when it comes to immigrant and Black communities.
So, we at BAJI are outraged, but we're not surprised by what we're seeing with the Biden immigration bill, as well as this latest enforcement priorities memo. We started off this administration since the day after the inauguration with the deportation of what's now over 1,000 Black migrants back to Haiti, back to Jamaica, Trinidad, to various countries on the continent of Africa. And these deportations in some cases are happening multiple times a day. And so just looking at that, right, the continuous detention of our folks, the hastened and accelerated deportations of our folks are really a sounding alarm for what's to come as we fight against the Biden administration's policies that are resulting in the continued criminalization, exclusion, and separation of Black people generally, but particularly with respect to immigration of Black migrants. We look at this immigration bill that's being so touted. Carl, you're seeing it too, advocates, media acting like this is the bold vision that we've all been waiting for. And it couldn't be more targeting of Black migrants for exclusion. It's disappointing in the sense that we've had so many conversations, and Carl, I know you were part of some of those, with the campaign teams, with the Biden-Sanders task force, with the transition teams, hammering in over and over again what we've been hammering since 2006 with respect to BAJI, that the criminalization of migrants, when you put in these criminal bars, when you say that people that have had certain types of criminal contacts with the criminal sanction system, when you say that those folks cannot benefit from protections that you are saying Black migrants cannot benefit from protection. 75% of Black migrants who are deported, we know, are deported on criminal grounds. We know that 1 out of every 5 Black migrants, that is in immigration court is a Black migrant. Criminalization as a result of anti-Blackness is just a part of our everyday lives. And it's really ridiculous that after it's been made so clear that we still find at the last minute, as usual, that these criminal bars have snuck their way into this immigration bill. It makes the bill really one that we cannot support, and that we unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because we were hoping for something different. That's why we marshaled all of these folks to the polls, because we thought we were going to get something different. But unfortunately, we are going to be on the other side of the line with the administration with respect to this bill. And that continues with respect to the enforcement memo. The initial enforcement memo that came out, we were already railing about that one. And that one did not specifically expand the public safety piece in the way that this latest one does. And so what we see is that we not only see a priority being made based on national security, which we know, especially for Black Muslim migrants, is always an issue that excludes them from benefits, but includes them in the criminalized and separated category. We then saw the border security, which basically boils down to if you were a migrant, in particular, we're talking about Black migrants here, that was seeking asylum, and if you thought that President Biden and his administration was going to be helpful to you, and therefore you crossed the border believing in the promise, you now have been betrayed, because you are in fact being targeted as priority for being deported. You're being deported now. And as part of the enforcement memo most recently issued, you are being included in the targeting for enforcement. And then thirdly, looking at public safety, it was at first, again, we were very unhappy with the idea that folks who were detained past a certain time period, that they would be a priority for deportation. We now find that it's not just people who are in jail or prisons, but it's just been expanded to whomever ICE feels is a public safety threat. And again, because of the criminalization of Black folks, including Black migrants, we know what that means for Black immigrants. Very dangerous, very deadly, very harmful. We can give no thumbs up with respect to this immigration bill and these enforcement policies.
Thanks, Donna. I mean, I could not have said it better. You really laid it out there for us. So one question that I have for you though is that what could we, you started out by saying that you weren't surprised that these are the policies that have been championed by the Biden administration. And so I guess the question I have is, what could Biden, the White House, be doing differently? Are there policies that you would have liked to see introduced during the first month in office or the first 100 days, whatever time period we're looking at early in the Biden administration?
So, Carl, the interesting piece is that Baji, as well as other organizations, we anticipated that there would be this conversation as we were entering into these transition meetings with the administration about, that we would get that question, what can we do, right? As if they don't know, but we were prepared to answer that question. And so I want to start with some of the things that were purported to be done that really weren't done. Number one was the moratorium on deportation, what they call the pause on removal. And if you look at the enforcement memo that was initially issued, and you look at the temporary restraining order that was issued by the judge in Texas, the temporary restraining order, or the judge's decision, focuses mainly on the failure to follow process that, you're supposed to go through. You're going to make these types of changes. There's procedural processes you have to go through, including identifying that, the reason for the change. And this is the same thing that was discussed when Trump had his pieces, right? When he did his thing, many of the times that he was flat back was because of this failure to follow process. And so I really see what was put out initially, which is what we clamored for, this moratorium on deportations. We wanted an end, but the moratorium was the first step. I feel that the effort that was made was more performative than real. Because if you know you've got to dot your I's and cross your T's, why would you not dot your I's and cross your T's if you really meant for it to happen? And so clearly we want that moratorium to happen, and whatever the deficiencies are that have been pointed out by the court, we expect that Biden administration to at least be able to do what the Trump administration was able to do, which was to hear what the judge said was done incorrectly and correct it and push it through. And so that's what we expect, a moratorium. We really want an end to the deportations completely. And we understand that some of that is legislative, but in terms of stopping planes from leaving, that is completely under the auspices of the Biden administration. And we expect that there will be no more planes deporting people, separating families under the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. When we look at what's happening in the court, we are looking for the administrative closure of cases. Again, that is something that is completely within the auspices of the Biden administration. We indicated to them, and we continue to expect, that those cases, that in particular cases where people have lived here for long periods of time, that those cases would be administratively closed, that they're not looking at deportation, they're not looking at detention anymore. With respect to those cases that involve people that are being detained, we expect for those people to be released, especially based upon COVID. Folks could be released right now, and that is all within the purview of the Biden administration. People should be getting released on humanitarian grounds, not in the trickle that even the Trump administration was, willing to do, but in the flood. We want them to be closed. A recent report by Detention Watch Network indicated that over 235,000 cases of COVID in the United States came out of detention centers. We know that those are super spreader places, just as jails and prisons are, and we expect for those places to be closed, and that's something the administration can do. We know that the administration can stop expelling people under Title 42, can allow people to come into this country, not into mandatory detention. I'm sure you saw recently, Carl, that the first new cages for kids have been opened under the Biden administration. I don't know how this is happening after all of the railing against kids in cages that has occurred over the past 4 years. But here we are with new cages being opened up. And that should not be happening for kids or for adults. Folks should be able to come into this country, be released into community, be released into family. The monies that are being used to create this invisible wall, as well as other barriers, as they describe them, of surveillance, of enforcement, of expulsion, all that what's happening at the borders and at other ports of entry. All of that money should be getting invested in making sure that as migrants come into this country, that they are taken care of, that they are safe, that they are healthy, that they are well, that they are resourced so that they can thrive in this country. Those are just some basics, right? The fundamentals of what should be happening. Stop the deportation, end the detention, close the centers, open up a way for people to come into this country and to be able to have permanent protections without having fear of deportation or detention.
Yeah, you raised a few things here that I wanted to, I wish we had more time today. But a couple of things that you raised that I did want to talk about is, as you mentioned, we have seen thousands of deportations of Haitian immigrants and other immigrants, but definitely Haitian immigrants over the last few weeks. We've seen the reopening of basically children's detention facilities. I remember back in 2017 when Trump first issued the Muslim ban. There was outrage. People were driving to the airport and protesting. There was outrage in, I guess it was 2018. Around family separation against Trump. Every step of the way, advocates were fighting back against Trump. People weren't afraid to take it to the streets. The media was speaking out. We had reporters on television crying. I could be wrong. I don't watch a ton of television. That's not true. I watch a lot of TV. But I haven't heard a lot of criticism thus far of the Biden administration. Like like everything that I've heard, all of these atrocities really that you mentioned, I've seen, buried in Politico or on page 13 of the New York Times or the sixth story on CNN. And I haven't heard a lot of criticism from advocacy organizations thus far. I haven't seen people really calling the Biden administration out in the media or on social media, or Twitter, etc. Over the last few weeks. Why do you think that is? Are people giving them a grace period, or why haven't we seen outrage around this?
So I think that it's the good old reasons that we've been here before. So, part of it, I think, in terms of the advocacy groups is because, number one, it's most of the people that are affected are people that they don't really consider to be part of the communities that they serve, which is to be plain about it. It's that type of anti-Blackness. We're in Black History Month. Whatever we've gotten from other groups has really been because of this. If this was happening in March, I don't know if we would have even gotten some of the retweets and post shares, etc., that we've gotten as we and other Black immigrant rights organizations have lifted up these issues. It's been almost silent. In fact, the opposite has been happening. You were seeing all kinds of emails and all kinds of statements that are going out that are praising the administration for the bill and praising the administration for the enforcement policies. And, the idea for some folks that I've talked to has been that, hey, something is better than nothing. And, my response is clearly you haven't played dominoes with Black people, because Black people will teach you that all money ain't good money, right? And something is not always better than nothing, especially when that something comes at the cost of the crushed bones under the bus wheel of other people. And in this case, those other people are Black people. And I think that that's, much of the reason why people aren't minding that sound and sight of crushed people under a bus wheel is because it's the crushed people are Black people. And so I think that's a big reason. I think the other reason is that people also have a level of embarrassment because people feel like, hey, we told our communities to come out, to vote, to risk COVID, to bring in this administration, and to now have to turn to our communities and say, oh, well, actually, the fight continues, right? The wicked witch is not dead and the flying monkeys are still out here. People don't want to do that. They feel like, it's going to mean something about our leadership, instead of really understanding that that is what leadership is. Leadership is shifting. Leadership is admitting that, hey, this is what our situation is. It's not over because we say that this administration is not living up to our promises. That doesn't mean that we, necessarily led our people astray or that we've been bad leaders, right? Because we did and we followed strategies, and if we were doing what we were supposed to do, we spoke truth to our people. We didn't, as Cabral teaches us, we didn't lie. We didn't mask difficulties. We didn't claim easy victories. And so it shouldn't be hard to go to our people, as Baji has, to our communities and say, hey, look, remember, these are the things that we want. Here's where these policies are meeting those things. Here's where these policies are falling short. Now we got to muster that same energy that we mustered to create this record-breaking, state-flipping election, to give our numbers even through COVID during the census. We got to take that same civic engagement energy and push for the things that we want and let this administration and this Congress know that that's not what we're seeing right now. And there should be no shame in that. But I think people are somewhat embarrassed to have to, face their communities in that kind of way. And that's a bad combination. In terms of the media, I have seen more on, and may he be safe, Tiger Woods and his accident over the past 2 days than I have on Black deportations at all since the beginning of this administration. And again, I think with the news, it's more exciting right now to make it seem as if, happy days are here again. The sun above is clear, skies above are clear again. And I think that we are going to have to press them as well, as we've done in the past. I know, Carl, you've been part of those fights to push back against these false narratives that there's nothing to see here, when in fact there is a lot to see here, and it's a lot of harm and trauma to Black communities.
So what's Baji doing, and what are groups like Baji doing to push back on this idea that everything is quote unquote okay now that Biden is in office?
So we have, some things that we're doing within our communities to share information, to, break down for folks clearly what it is that these policies mean for Black community members, whether they are impacted by the criminal sanctions system or not. And we're looking at, continuing that work, hosting a webinar, doing some more stuff in terms of media, including social media, to make it plain in terms of what these policies, executive orders and memos really mean. We're looking in terms of our coalition partners and really pressing them and saying, look, your position is one that is not a righteous position, is not line up with the values that you claim to have. And it's on us as the trusted voices in the community, as folks who are doing the work in the community, to make sure that we're aligning our, what we applaud and what we abhor with the values that we claim to have. And so we're pushing, we're leaning into our values, leaning into what our coalition partners indicate are their values, to set straight the crooked road that we're dealing with right now. And then with respect to the administration and Congress, we're on them. We are pressing. We just had a rally recently in Washington, D.C., with other Black immigrant rights and racial justice groups coming together to speak out and to, we had a LED truck that went all over the city pointing out that President Biden is also deporting and making demands about detention and deportation. And we're going to continue to do that with the administration, but then also with Congress, reaching out to members of Congress, some who already see this vision and are articulating those values to support them, and then others that seem to be hesitant and, trying to ride the fence and really pushing them to say, this is not why we elected you. And 2022 is right around the corner. If the Democrats do not deliver in this moment, they're going to have a hard way to hold on to not just the Senate, but the House as we move into 2022. And so it's to their benefit to actually honor their promises and to work on that bold vision that the people who are most impacted have shared with them.
Well, Nana, I want to thank Baji for just all of the amazing work that you do to defend our communities, to defend poor people, Black communities, all communities of color, because that's, really in centering Black folks here, uplifting everyone, really. So thank you so much for your work on the ground and for being with us today. Where can folks learn more about your work and Baji's work?
You can go to baji.org. That is our website, baji.org. You can also follow us on Baji Tweet, follow us at InstaBaji, and follow us on Facebook.
Great. Well, thanks again, Nana. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. To learn more about Brooklyn Community Bail Fund, you can visit us at brooklynbailfund.org. You can also follow us or DM us on Twitter at BK Bail Fund or Instagram at Brooklyn Bail Fund. And please don't forget to rate our podcast or share our podcast and to leave us a review so that we can continue to game the algorithms. Until next time, and until we're all free, peace out.